Welcome to Great Comedic Minds by Cara Robertson, a podcast where we meet some of the greatest comedic creators of our time and find out their real stories. From your favorite TV shows, movies, and live stand-up, we interview the storytellers and joke writers who have entertained us for years to find out exactly how and why they do it. And now, here's your host, Cara Robertson.
I'm here with Tim Batt, a New Zealand-based comedian who has won the One Cover comedy competition, been a global finalist in the Laugh Factory's Funniest Person in the World, been nominated twice for a Billy T Award. He's created his own podcast, The Worst Idea of All Time, has his own podcast network. He's performed in London, USA, Australia, and all across New Zealand. He's written and appeared on shows such as 7 Days, Jono and Ben, and The Late Night Big Breakfast. Tim Batt has made a live streaming comedy art show called The Happening, written and hosted a live TV political chat show called Banter, produced Comedy Central's No Experience Necessary, and was executive producer on TV New Zealand's New Blood project. He was also a showrunner, producer of the podcast turned web series, The Male Gaze. That's a pretty big intro, Tim. Well done.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
It's very, it's nice hearing the credits, but it's kind of sad in some ways hearing a bio that I've written read back to me by someone else.
That I've copied.
You sound desperate, man. You're sounding pretty desperate.
Thanks for joining us today.
A pleasure.
So where are you at the moment? What city are you in?
Seattle, Washington, United States. No, I'm kidding. I'm in Auckland. I'm in as you can see, this is not the most professional. You can only see this in my webcams. This is just for you, Cara, but I've literally got like an open closet behind me. It's got clothes just busting out. I'm just at home studio.
Yeah, fair enough. So
can I ask as well, have you got a telescope next to you?
I do. Yeah, that's the map and the telescope. I try to make this room look like we're on a ship.
Awesome.
Like in
I love that.
Yeah, I don't know what, no reason. It's got like compasses.
Great. I love that.
Yeah. Is Auckland where you grew up?
I was born and raised in Christchurch, and then we moved when I was 11 to Wellington. So I spent all my high school years there. And I lived in Sydney very briefly when I was about 20, and then moved back. So I've probably Auckland is the city I've spent the most time now. I think I've been here for about, I can't remember, maybe 13 years now.
What was it like growing up there?
Well, growing up in Christchurch was all good. It's very flat and it's quite white, less so than it was, which is good. But it's a bit of a like monocultural, or at least it used to be kind of a place. But yeah, I don't know. It was very kind of safe feeling, middle class-ish upbringing. Wellington was pretty cool. Wellington was a little bit sort of freakier, more artistic. The high school I went to was quite a liberal, artsy kind of a college, which was really good. I went to a place called Onslow College.
Okay. What were you like there? Were you funny when you were at school?
I was trying to be, man.
Yeah.
I was doing my best. Was I funny in school? I think so. Not, there were funnier people than me, to be sure, but I hopefully was a good quality hang. I tried to leave high school after sixth form, and there was a bunch of criteria. Oh, sorry, what is that called now? Year 12, I think we call it now.
Oh, okay. When you said year 6, that's like an 11-year-old. So
yeah, right.
Yeah, so you mean like at the end?
When I was 17.
Yeah, okay.
Or 16 even, I was like, I don't need this last one, I'm out. And I was going to go to university. So there was a bunch of criteria you had to hit. You had to have your grades at a certain level and to get a couple of letters of recommendation from different people in the school faculty. So I got it all together, and then my parents were like, nah, man, you should totally do seventh form. It's like an important year. And I was like, I'm out. I'm bored. I don't want to be there. But they sort of insisted that I do seventh form. And then I was so bored during that year at high school that I ended up writing a play and putting that on, which was quite fun, about Hercules and Zeus and Hera So in the play, Zeus sees the Lord of the Rings, because this is when the movies were just, coming out really big. And he falls in love with the New Zealand landscape. So he decides to move his family off Mount Olympus and move to Wellington. And they have a terrible time as new Greek immigrants and are treated like shit. And Hercules has to navigate high school and all that kind of stuff. So, I think a lot of creativity gets made out of boredom. And maybe that was my first big introduction to that experience.
Sounds like a great idea. Like, we should pitch that to some networks now. I think, is it a comedy? Yeah.
It is a comedy. I found the script the other day. It was like in a shoebox where I've got some old memorabilia from high school. And I was having a thumb through it. I was like, this ain't bad. I wrote this when I was 16 or 17. There's pretty funny stuff in here. It's not terrible.
Yeah, you might rehash some of the projects.
Yeah, why not? Give it a dust off. I've already done the hard yakka. I can just kind of update it with some modern references. Luckily, Lord of the Rings is still big, thanks to Jeff Bezos, so it's still relevant.
When did you decide that you wanted to start working in comedy?
Oh, that's a good question, because I do have a very specific sort of story for this. When I was living in Sydney, that's kind of a funny story unto itself, but I'm not sure if my friend, who's the real reason I moved over there, kind of wants me saying it, so I might leave that bit out. But basically, we were chasing a girl. He was chasing a girl, and I went with him. So it was very sweet. And we moved to Sydney, and I was working at the call center at Telstra. That was off the back of me having worked in a few different call centers in New Zealand, in Wellington. Just as soon as I left high school, I was working at the tax department, if you can believe that. And I woke up one morning when I must have been 20, I think. And I literally was like, I'm going to wake up one morning and be 40 years old and be working at this call center or another call center like it. And it just scared the shit out of me. And so that day I applied for the New Zealand Radio Training School, and got accepted and did a 6-month course to learn how to do broadcasting, how to do radio. And then started working in radio for about 5 or 6 years.
Okay, so that would have, obviously, if you're working in radio, you can't do all the visual sort of gags, so you really have to just use your voice, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was producing a lot. By the time I ended, I was doing some co-hosting, but I was producing on some pretty big shows. So when you start out in radio, if you're hosting, usually if you're like young and an unknown commodity, you're going to be hosting on some really small, small town stations, that sort of thing. Or the alternative is you can try and get a job where you're sort of like a small fish in a big pond, being a off-air and on-air producer on a bigger show, which is luckily, a lot of people try and get into radio, and there's very few jobs. So I was super duper lucky at the start of my career there, and managed to work with some real heavyweights and learn a lot of good comedy off them. And that was around the time when I started doing stand-up as well, just as like a hobby.
Okay, so you came over as a wingman, got a job that you thought was dull, but then you wanted to do something different. How did you actually get that first job? Because you just mentioned that it was quite difficult for people to get into radio. So how did you do that? I went to the radio training school, and there was an intake. When we started, I want to say there was about 25 people, and it had a really high dropout rate. Like, I think maybe 16, 18 of us made it across the finish line. And it was only a 6-month course. But I think radio is one of those things where it does attract like a very broad spectrum of people who sort of get enamored with the idea of doing it. And for my money, like, it wasn't the hardest course in the world. So I sort of noticed that happening. I was like, okay, if I actually sort of pull finger here, I could try and, sort of stand out of the crowd a little bit. And there was basically 3 of us in that group that became really good mates, and we just worked really hard and tried to figure everything out. And I ended up getting the ducks of that class. I was going to say not bragging, but there's no getting around it. That was just a brag. Yeah. So
based on that, it's just beyond that. I mean, you can only try as hard as you can, and then it's just up to luck and timing. So luckily there was a position that a radio station in Auckland, they were looking for a producer for this legendary broadcaster called Kevin Black. And who's since passed away. But Blackie, I think, might hold the record as the highest paid broadcaster in Australia and New Zealand. In the 80s, back when radio was big, he was like the top dog and he was getting paid obscene amounts of money. So I got to produce for him and work with him in the sort of last radio job that he had in his career, which was super special.
That sounds amazing. So you had multiple skills. So it sounds like that helped a lot. So you could talk and you could produce at the same time.
Yeah. The multiple skills thing I think is really important. And it's like, I think there's a lot to just going, do you have any interest? Do you have anything that you enjoy doing? And for me, like, luckily, I'm a fucking massive nerd. Like, I'm a big geek. I love tinkering with gear and playing with computers and learning how, audio equipment works and that sort of thing. So I was quite at home, figuring out all this new equipment and new software and things that run the radio stations. And a lot of that is just attitude. Like, you've just got to be really sort of in a risk averse sort of a mood. You've just got to go in there and press all the buttons and see if it breaks. And if it doesn't, you're like, cool, what did I just do? I think that's been my approach to like learning how technology works. A lot of people are just quite scared that they're going to break the thing. But if you just start mucking around with some low stakes equipment, you can kind of teach yourself how technology works and you just start building on that knowledge. And I think now more than ever, like, you need multiple skills, and tech might not be your thing, but if you enjoy writing, you should try and develop that. You should see if you can pick up any low stakes work doing that will sharpen your tools there, or see if there's any courses that you might want to do to pick that up if you're good at it. I've got no visual art skills whatsoever. I really wish I did. Wish I could do like illustration or design. I can't. But if you're that way inclined, like, pursue that a little bit. See if you can do little odd cheap jobs for friends and stuff like that, because I think everyone needs lots of strings to their bow these days.
Yeah, I remember watching Emma Watkins. She was in the Wiggles and she could drum, she could edit, she could sing, she was ballerina. Just thought, no wonder they hired her.
You kind of need that to stay afloat often as well, because in this, like, I hate to break it to anyone, but comedy really does not pay for 95% of people who are doing stand-up. It takes a long time and a lot of luck, really, to eventually start making it your career, your proper career. And you've got to have some other things going on to get you there to that point.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Going back to your stand-up, so why did you start doing stand-up?
Good question. I guess I always enjoyed performing, like at Onslow College that I mentioned before. It's a very like liberal arts style high school in Wellington. So the drama department was really strong, and I always liked, acting and performing. I wasn't the best actor in the world, but I did like doing it. And it's just, I think, I can't remember the exact phrase, but George Carlin talks about this. There's this legendary old comedian and poet and social commentator from the States from way back when. He talks about stand-up comedians being people who want to be cute. They just want to be liked. They want to stand on a stage and go, hey, look at me, look at how cute I am. And it's kind of true. Like, it's in some ways it's a little bit pathetic, but I think all people would love to be showered with adoration in front of a room full of strangers. There's something in that reptilian brain that appeals. And I've always been quite a sort of politically minded person as well. So I like the sort of creative exercise of trying to turn some of those ideas into something that's remotely funny, to try and Trojan horse some ideas into a crowd that's come to drink a few beers and have a chuckle.
You're passing on a message, but doing it through comedy. So people entertained as well as getting informed.
Totally. I think it's a really important art form for that reason. You can introduce some pretty subversive ideas, and you can really question stuff that's the current, way of thinking, the current orthodoxy, inside of this wrapper where it looks like, and you sort of, it's just like, it's a bit of light entertainment, come out, see a show, see a comedy show. But then depending on who you're dealing with and your skill level and that, you can insert some pretty cool ideas into people's brains when they turn up.
So out of that, you've done podcasts, you've worked in radio, you've done stand-up, and there's work in TV here. What's been your favourite project?
Good question. I mean, I guess I'd have to say my own podcast, The Worst Idea of All Time, just because of the opportunities that's afforded. Like myself and Guy Montgomery have been doing that for, I think this is our 8th year now. We started in February 2014. And like we've done shows in sold out rooms in the States, in Los Angeles and New York. We've had huge guests on, like, Paul F. Tompkins. So the premise of our podcast is we just keep watching the same movie over and over again and keep reviewing it. And we started off with Grown Ups 2, this Adam Sandler movie. And so we just watched that every week for a year and kept reviewing it. And that's all the podcast was. And by the end of it, it had sort of garnered this online following, particularly in Los Angeles, I think, because there were all of these people who were involved in the film industry, or sort of on the periphery of Hollywood. So they thought this idea was, stupid, but delightful, somewhat funny. And Guy and I wrote this insane script of Grown Ups 2 based on our memory alone. Like we just had to try and piece it together. And we did a version of that in Auckland with our comedian friends here. And then we did that script in Los Angeles to this huge room. And we had like Melanie Linsky was reading one of the parts. Busy Phillips was there. All of these, it was just insane. I don't know. You look back at stuff like that, it's like, how did that happen? But this is what I love about the creative arts and comedy is if you just keep like putting stuff out there, you just keep doing things and trying things, and like most of it doesn't really work, but at least you're having fun, and maybe the joke doesn't land, or the format that you've landed on isn't quite right, or people aren't into it, or whatever. But if you're just unstoppably putting ideas out all the time, at some point it will click and you'll trip over something that's really good. And then suddenly you get connected with all of these other incredible creative people, and you're making this really fun thing. And yeah, it's cool. It's good fun.
I have read that you are one thing you're very good at and known for is that you can make these shows on very little to no budget. Have you got any any tips to tell people how to do that?
Learn your gear is what I would say. Not drugs, although that's still good advice. You should learn what your gear is if you can. But if you've got equipment that you're using, audio equipment, video equipment, and by that I don't even mean you need to go out and buy super expensive stuff, but like you could be using cell phones these days, especially for video content. Like if you've got a half decent iPhone or Samsung or whatever, you can make that video look pretty incredible. But figure it out. Go on YouTube, watch some tutorials, read advice. How do you get the best picture quality out of a thing? How do you make stuff look good? If there's something that you want to emulate, try and mock it up. See how you can do your own version of that thing, and Google it. See, like, how do I make something look or sound like this thing? And as long as you have like a kind of a constant curiosity and you enjoy learning new stuff like that, I think that's a big key for getting budgets down, because there is a real infatuation with buying very expensive technology, microphones for podcasts, amazing cameras for video, all this stuff. The reality is you can get an incredible result out of pretty cheap, shitty gear if you know what you're doing. So that's always been my sort of take on it. So I've always just tried to learn how to get the best out of the stuff that I've got.
We're pretty lucky that it's all on the internet for free. Like I can't imagine doing this stuff in the 90s where people had to read books and try and research how to do it.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? And it's because I've been thinking about this a bit recently, and it really sort of in some ways restores my faith in humanity. We're just surrounded by terrible news, and everyone talks about terrible people, and on Twitter, like it's all this asshole and da-da-da, blah, blah, blah. It's all very like negative. But they're kind of like, you go on YouTube and these sorts of things that I'm looking up. It's just these people who are massive nerds about something, some specific area that they've mastered, and they cannot wait to tell you. And often really for no gain to them. They just want to get the word out and make sure that other people find out about this thing that they've figured out. And it's really cool. It's a very human need, I think, or a human desire to share this information and share the tools. And it's cool.
Right, when you meet someone very passionate about it and they just, full of energy and, excited to help.
Exactly.
What is your number one bit of advice to people trying to get into comedy, whether creating, writing, just the number one thing you'd tell them?
It's a really hard balance to be able to be self-critical without being self-destructive. But if you can learn how to do that, that is going to serve you incredibly well. If you can try and protect your psyche a little bit, but at the same time record every performance that you do, and really, like, don't do it immediately after you've been on stage. Don't do it like the night of the show. But if you can force yourself, and it's a really hard thing to do, like it's very much easier said than done. But if you can listen back to the performance that you did, or if you videoed it, watch back with a critical eye, does that line need to be there? Can I improve on that punchline? Can I improve the word economy? Can I remove some stuff? Am I looking down too much? Do I need to connect with the audience more? Am I pacing on the stage? And connecting with other people as well. Like, people are busy in that, but often if you come into it with a bit of humility and a genuine desire to get some feedback, a lot of comedians will be willing to give you some tips. If you've got like some recordings of your performances, or maybe you've got some jokes written down and you reach out to people whose style you really like, they might say no, and they might be too busy, and that's totally fine. That's their prerogative, but you might be surprised at who's willing to give you a hand if you genuinely are like, look, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but if we could jump on a Zoom for 30 minutes just to talk about the craft and what I want to do, and I'm a big fan of yours, and da-da-da. A lot of people will help you out like that. The other tip that I would have is, if you can figure out how to put your own shows on, that's really good. And again, especially if you can put a lens on of put a show on, see what works, see how you can improve, and try and keep that constant improvement thing. It's like, what was the crowd like this week? Did anyone come? Do I need to figure out how to market better? Is the poster any good? All of that sort of stuff. And you got to start from somewhere. So you don't want to be so self-critical that you get trapped and you don't start anywhere, but just like make a start somewhere, take the first step. And then as long as you can keep trying to improve on that, performance or show or whatever you're doing, then you kind of naturally will be pretty unstoppable. It's just a matter of time before you become super successful.
Have you ever had a massive flop, like anything that's gone really wrong?
You kidding me? Of course. More often than not. Yeah, totally. Yeah, more stuff doesn't work than works, I would say. I did a gig last night and it didn't go great. But it's like part of the beauty of it, there is something very freeing about learning how to do stand-up comedy and bombing, because it's most people's literally worst nightmare. Like, public speaking outranks death in terms of most people's biggest fear. And so you're doing public speaking, trying to make strangers laugh, and then suddenly it doesn't work. Like, for most people, that is the absolutely most terrifying thing that could happen. And when you start doing stand-up, it happens all the time. You're constantly bombing. So you put something out there, you try a new bit, you die on your ass. Maybe the whole set, you just eat shit. Who knows? Happens to me all the time. But you then have faced the thing that is most people's greatest fear, and you go to bed that night, and the sun comes up the next day, and you try again. You didn't lose an arm. The thing that I always tell new comedians is like, my wife, she's a doctor. If she has a bad day at work, someone could die. If I have a bad day at work, 35 people I've never met don't particularly like me, and then will probably forget about me after they leave the room. Who gives a shit? That's fine. It's all good.
Fair enough. That is very good advice. I think the doctor point, pretty good. My husband's an airline pilot, so same.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
He could really mess up
Yeah.
someone's day, you know? The potential was high.
Fingers crossed he doesn't.
No.
Yeah. Can we finish with a game? Would you be willing to play a game with me?
Cara, I love a game.
Oh, good. This game is called What Truly Was the Worst Idea of All Time.
Oh, a game you've custom built for me.
Yeah, we might market
nice.
it in the shops
Cool.
later, but
Yeah, go for it.
it's very specific though. So I'm going to put you in scenarios and you have to decide what was
Sure.
the worst idea for that particular role. So at the moment, you're an engineer who builds parachutes.
Mm-hmm.
So what was worse? And these are true things that happened. And you have to pick which one, and we'll work out from what actually happened, what was the worst idea. So attempting to invent a parachute suit and then self-testing it is the first option. The second option is accidentally flying a fighter jet into a thunderstorm and then ejecting and using your parachute to try and get out of the thunderstorm. Which one do you think is worse?
I think the latter.
The latter.
Because, yeah, look, they're both not great ideas. But I think look, you've put me in the mindset of a parachute engineer. That word carries a lot of weight for me. So presumably I've got a pretty good understanding of aerodynamics, physics, what's going on with parachutes, how much I weigh. I would hope that I could kind of make it work more often than not, you know? Whereas ejecting, did you say a fighter jet in the middle of a thunderstorm?
We've got a big budget, yeah.
There's so much out of my control. I can't control lightning. I don't know what it does. I don't know really how it works. It seems terrifying. In a fighter jet, what am I doing in there? I'm a parachute engineer, for crying out loud. I shouldn't be anywhere near a fighter jet. So I would say that one is the worst idea.
So I'll go through what happened. In 1878, Franz Reichelt jumped to his death from the Eiffel Tower after trying to invent the parachute suit.
Oh, God.
So that one didn't go that well. In 1959, William Rankin was flying to South Carolina, inadvertently flew into a thunderstorm and ejected. He was then stuck in the thunderstorm for 40 minutes with the air currents. But he survived.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So
he was just floating around out there for close to an hour. He must have been cold.
Yeah, he got burnt. Like the cold burnt him and everything.
Wow.
But when he landed, he finally, went into a tree. He came down. He was on the side of the highway because he looked so messed up. No one would pick him up. So they just all left him there for a while.
Oh my God. This guy probably, you'd have to imagine, as part of the Air Force or something, right?
Yes.
He's just testing fighter jets. This guy is a hero.
Yeah. So, I would...
No one's picking him up? My God.
My guess, I don't know if you agree, is probably the first one went worse because he died.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know.
With that context, you're right. Anything that results in death will probably outrank something that doesn't result in death.
The second scenario, so now you work for NASA and you're deciding what people should take to space. So do you think it'd be worse for someone to bring a gorilla suit on board or a sandwich?
You said these are based on truth, right?
They're based on the truth, yes.
I don't know why you would bring a gorilla suit. I know why you would bring a sandwich. So the gorilla suit surely is the worst idea.
Okay, we'll go through them. 2016, astronaut Scott Kelly he was sent a gorilla costume by his brother aboard the ISS, that's the International Space Station. So it was all vacuum packed, so no one knew it was there. And then he put it on and scared the other astronaut, Tim Batt. And you can see it. They put it on Twitter, so you can try and find that one. And it's very funny to watch because they're floating. So,
oh my God. Is Scott Kelly that real loose Canadian dude who just kept making goofy videos while he was on the ISS? Or is it someone else?
Well, I don't know. Actually, he might have been. It wasn't that long ago. It was 5 years ago, or 4 years. Second scenario, 1981 on Gemini 3, the astronaut and pilot John Young bought a corned beef sandwich and it nearly derailed the entire $30 million mission. This is because the crumbs started floating around.
Oh, shit, of course.
Yeah, and they spoof it on, I don't know if you've seen the Simpsons episode where he opens the chips and
Oh, yes, that
Yeah,
rings a bell. And Homer's floating through the air, rotating while he has to like devour all the chips. Yeah.
Yeah, so he did manage to put it away before too many crumbs went out, though, so the mission did continue. So, yeah, what do you think was the worst idea of those?
Oh, look, in retrospect, the sandwich.
Yeah.
It sounds like nothing too bad came from the gorilla suit.
No, well, maybe some psychological issues, but that's none of my business. So,
True.
yeah.
I'm going to try and look up that video. I want to see that gorilla suit in space. Yes.
Yeah, last one.
Cool.
What do you think is the worst pet or animal to be kept in captivity out of a hippopotamus or a tiger shark?
The theme of this game seems to be whatever I pick, I'm wrong. So I want to try and second guess whatever my initial instinct was. And therefore, I'm going to say hippopotamus.
Okay, well, we'll go through it. So this one's only recent. This was 2 years ago. There was a South African farmer, Marius Els. He had a hippo he raised. He called it his son. They were close. He used to ride it in the water and everything. It did attack him.
Gutted.
Yeah. Tiger shark in 1935. This is in Coogee, so in New South Wales, just near Sydney. They captured a tiger shark and put it in an aquarium. After it was there, it began to show signs that it was sick, and then it vomited up a human arm.
Whoa.
Yeah. So this
my God.
Yeah, it led to a murder investigation and a trial, and the arm belonged to a man who was working, because it had tattoos on it, so they could identify it. He was working for the police as an informer. So,
Holy moly.
So he was fed to a shark, and then the tiger shark ate that shark.
Hey, Cara, do you know what that means?
What?
That narc got eaten by a shark.
Yeah, we should make that into a whole show just based on that. Good. That was fast. That was very fast.
Thank you.
So, but you probably, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, both animals, well, it doesn't sound like the tiger shark killed anyone. It sounds like someone tried to dispose of a body. So based on that, I'm wrong again, because the hippopotamus actually ended someone's life, whereas the tiger shark just ate someone's arm who was already dead. So maybe they did less harm.
The hippo, though, maybe has a lot of psychological effects because it was his best friend. So maybe you were right in that it was much worse, to be eaten by someone you love than a strap. Like the shark, probably they didn't know each other beforehand.
Oh, that's true. The premise is which would be the worst pet. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. Hippopotamus is on the money.
Yeah. So I don't know if you were planning on purchasing either of those pets, but
did you know that Pablo Escobar had a bunch of hippos?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
When he got caught, they all got loose, and now there's like this semi out of control hippo population in Cuba. Yeah. Wait, Cuba? Not Cuba. Where was he in South America? Colombia. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's doing anything about that, or whether they're just roaming free.
Hippos are pretty cool, and I think endangered when you're not in Colombia. So maybe just let them be.
Yeah, they'll have a good time. Maybe it's their country now. I do have an interesting New Zealand fact about animal deaths.
Love to hear it. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear my New Zealand animal in the background, but apologies. My dog's going nuts at probably a courier, knowing him.
That's all right. We've got plovers here. Those are like birds with knives for hands. Have you seen those?
A what? What are they called?
Plovers. They attack you, but they've got spurs on their wings, so it's kind of like they're carrying knives and they swoop down. So they make a horrible noise. I'm glad they're not doing it right now.
I've seen a lot of bin chickens, and I've seen what are the real vicious? Are they caribous or what? No, what are they called? The ones with the like talony claws that can really easily take out a human.
Oh, the cassowary.
Cassowary. That's what. Yeah. You got some scary shit over there. We've just got kiwis, big fat boys that can't even get off the ground.
Yeah, although they can be scary if you stir them up enough.
Kiwis?
Oh, I thought you meant kiwi, the people.
Well,
no, not the bird.
We're also pretty chill most of the time. Takes a bit to get us rocked up.
Yeah, you have to do quite a lot.
Yeah.
So there was a woman, she was an aviatrix in 1936, and she was from New Zealand. And she flew the first solo flight from England to New Zealand. But she was killed by being bitten by a dog.
Was it, do you know what happened? Was it rabies or?
No, she just didn't want to get it treated and it got infected. So
damn.
Yeah.
That does make sense to me, because it'd be just the kind of attitude of, one of the first female aviators who's breaking world records and stuff, to be like, nah, it's fine. I don't need help from other people.
Yeah,
I'm a
definitely.
legend. And then promptly die.
Yeah, from a dog. Unfortunate.
Gutted.
Yeah. That's the end of the show. Thank you very much for coming on board, Tim. Really appreciate it, and I appreciate all the insights that you've provided. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Great to be with you, Cara. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us on a great episode of Great Comedic Minds. We'll be back next week, so be sure to tune in. Also, like, share, subscribe to the channel, and be sure to follow Cara Robertson on Instagram.